thrilled to have you. So thrilled. Okay. It's 4:03, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to our Qyral Thursday night training. I'm Honey Sagari, founder and CEO of Qyral, and tonight we're so privileged to have with us a distinguished guest who brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, and dedication to the field of functional and integrative health. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jacqueline Leone, a notable figure whose credentials are as diverse as they are impressive. Let me brag a little about her. Isn't she gorgeous, by the way? You're absolutely stunning. But Dr. Leone, she's a highly accomplished physician, educator, researcher, and a writer who's committed to promoting functional medicine and integrative health. Dr. Leone holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, a doctorate degree in naturopathic medicine, and board certification in holistic nutrition. In addition to practicing medicine, Dr. Leone has developed and currently teaches science and nutrition courses for a nationally accredited institution. She performs research and writes for international health news sites, and she's also a national public speaker. She specializes in chronic illness, gastrointestinal dysregulation, metabolic syndromes, inflammatory conditions, and mental health, all at the root of longevity and wellness. Dr. Leone's distinctive medical approach marries evidence-based practices with the timeless wisdom of traditional healing modalities. She offers a truly holistic perspective to medicine, concentrating on functional medicine that not only treats symptoms, I love this, but addresses the root cause of the disease, which ultimately creates a more sustainable path to wellness. And it's everything that we're all about here at Qyral. So I love that. But tonight, we're so excited to learn from her rich experience and profound understanding of health and wellness. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Leone. Thank you again. Thank you for being here. If we'll just dive right in. Just a little about yourself. What made you passionate about the field of functional and integrative medicine? For those people who don't know about it, maybe, share with us your journey and talk to us a little about it.
Oh my gosh, I feel so honored right now. Thank you. That was such a great, I didn't know you were going to read the whole bio. You're amazing. Thank you.
You are impressive.
I love it. It's crazy to hear it all bullet pointed out. You have a career, you spend your life doing things, and somebody reads it out all at once and you're like, wow, I really have done some things. Thank you for having me. So my health journey, I had a lot of anxiety, depression, cycle stuff, GI stuff growing up as a kid. I was that kid that was always getting food poisoning and just anxious and really held it in my body. And I would always self-soothe just intuitively with things like hydrotherapy, like taking a warm shower or a cold pack, or I just kind of knew to listen to my body at a very, very early age. And I was fascinated by the mind and the mind-body connection and how we can manifest things physically simply by having a thought, whether that's a bad thought creating anxiety or a pleasant thought creating harmony. So I started going to school for psychology. That was where it all started. And about halfway through, I was a little cynical and rough around the edges. What am I going to do with this? I don't really know. And what's my direction? So I took a semester off to just work, save up money, figure out life at 19. And I actually got a job at a holistic acupuncturist office where they did herbs and supplements and mind-body medicine and meditation. And I had never been exposed to anything like that before. And because I was only part-time, in lieu of benefits, the physicians, there were 3 treating physicians at the time, got together and said, we can't offer insurance, but we can offer healthcare through our services in alternative health. And within the year and a half I worked there, I stopped having panic attacks. My ideations went away. I went on 2 sugar cleanses and realized my addiction to sugar and my need to create dopamine and feel good hormones through food. And it really kind of woke me up. And I said, I need to do this, but I don't, I'm going to age myself. But back in 2003, nobody knew what alternative healthcare really was. It was kind of like going off into the woods and chewing on sticks and banging on drums. It wasn't a real thing in the medical community. And so I just started doing research, and this is right when the internet became a big thing as well, and everyone was using it. And lo and behold, I found a medical school, which was a 4-year medical degree that did lab work and minor surgeries and really learned about imaging and oncology and what happens in disease states and biochemistry and all the rich sciencey stuff I wanted for credibility. But the toolbox that we were taught to use was just so much bigger and more dynamic than just surgery or just medications alone, and using things like nutrition and functional medicine, which essentially, if you know biochemistry and how the factory in us works, then you know how things can go wrong, and then you know how to fix them, and you know what tool is right for the job. And so that's really where I found my focus. And I love that some people need different combinations of things, from hormone testing and nutrition to mind-body medicine and trauma therapy. Most people need a little bit of everything in most cases, but I just really loved how dynamic the toolbox was, and I think anybody here who loves to cook or loves to fix things around the house, that you can't just use one tool for every job, right? The more specialized the tool, the more efficient and productive and effective you can be in creating that meal or fixing that thing around the house, right? So we were taught not everything is a nail, so don't just learn how to use a hammer, right? And that is really what sets us apart in naturopathy versus like a standard DO or MD program. Is our toolbox is just different. And I am a big fan of the right tool for the job, right? If I'm in a car accident and I need surgery or I need medication IVs to prevent infection, you better believe I'm going to use conventional medicine all day long. But when it comes to the day-to-day, if my blood sugar gets out of whack, or if I'm having, maybe some anxiety or depression, and I'm going to check in on my cycle, I'm going to make sure I'm eating protein and taking those micronutrients that maybe the last week or two, because I've been so busy, I haven't been giving myself, right? So checking in, being aware, and just giving ourselves the things that we need to live to our highest potential, which isn't always cutting a corner like a medication. So it just depends, again, on the person, the situation, the ideal outcome or goal, and just utilizing the correct tool for the job. So that's how I found naturopathic medicine. There was no question. I finished my degree in 2 years, got into med school, sold everything I had, moved across the country, and the rest is history.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, that's just a little bit about me and what sets naturopathic functional medicine doctors apart from maybe DOs or MDs that you all might be, used to working with.
Oh, I love that. So my background is biochemistry, and I love it. Like, it's all these little gears in the body that come together to make this thing flawlessly function. So I love that you have a background and you talk about that. You're right. Now, can you talk to us a little about your experience working with weight loss patients? And yeah, talk to us about, so weight gain isn't something that happens overnight. So, and your experience as a professional who looks at health holistically, can you tell us what causes individuals to to gain weight, and what makes it so difficult to lose the weight? Talk to us about that experience and what you've learned through this journey.
Absolutely. So I have had a lot of experience, both personally and professionally, with weight loss. I have worked in things like phentermine clinics, which we all maybe are familiar with in the weight loss industry, but phentermine is an amphetamine derivative, and it's essentially meant to jack up the nervous system to a point of stress that it limits appetite and prevents you from eating. And so you lose weight that way, but it does create addiction. And so you are required by law to have a washout period of 6 to 12 weeks every so often. And so weight loss was happening, but then the rebound weight gain came back. And so that's the conventional side of things. And then when it comes to the naturopathic side of things, it's usually an insulin resistance that happens over time because of a diet high in processed carbohydrates, processed bleached sugars, These things are really common in our culture. It's a way to celebrate. It also releases dopamine in the brain, which when we don't take care of our emotional state or our nervous system, and we live kind of high stress lives where we're spread too thin, the body is going to do what it naturally, innately, and easily can do to calm that nervous system down. And so as the stress hormone cortisol rises, dopamine and serotonin, dopamine being the reward system that sugar offers, and serotonin being the calming hormone or mood stabilizer, which usually requires exercise, journaling, crying, processing to develop, or a sense of safety, which we tend to lack. So we lean on the dopamine, right? And so it's a kind of an over-the-counter drug. You don't have to be 21 or 18 to purchase food or sugar, right? It's available to everyone. It's very inexpensive. And so it usually is the first line of defense to us working to quell the nervous system. And so what happens over time when we have high levels of blood sugar is our body has to pump out the hormone insulin at really high levels, because insulin is kind of like the doorman to the cell. We eat sugar, it goes into the highway of the bloodstream, and in order to get into the cells so the cells can function and have their fuel, insulin opens the door to the cell. And so when insulin has to constantly show up to work over and over and over again, because we have such high blood sugar, eventually it gets resistant, and our pancreas either stops making it or stops making as much, or the beta cells are just overworked, which are the cells that create it and produce it. And so they just go kaput over time. And what insulin's job is to, like I said, to pull sugar into the cell, but it's going to utilize what it needs immediately and store what it doesn't need for later use, right? That's insulin's job, is when our blood sugar gets too high, it wants to keep us normal. And then when it crashes too low, we have this thing called glucagon, which is the opposite of insulin, where it pulls our sugar back up. And then when it gets too high, insulin pulls it down. And then when it gets too low, glucagon pulls it back up. So it's kind of this balancing act that our body just innately knows about. And so when we emotionally eat or stress eat, or maybe it is our household, right? I mean, I don't know about you. I'm from a big Italian family, and food was everything: a good day, a bad day, a celebration, a wake, a loss, a win. You know, you're always eating and you're always celebrating, and there's always leftovers in the fridge. And so, you know, also, I think historically, we are taught things like how to tie our shoes and brush our teeth, but we're not really taught this is anger, and this is how we deal with it. This is grief, and these are outlets for it, right? So one of the biggest parts of being a human, which is our emotional body, really goes left unchecked and uneducated for a lot of us. You know, and that's changing as the internet and I think people are learning the you know, detriments of not processing feelings. And so it is getting better, but it's still missing in a lot of people's lives. So that combination with, you know, lack of awareness of self or what to do with these strong feelings, the accessibility to these foods that jack up blood sugar, and then over time, not really understanding how that's detrimentally affecting our health, it's going to create insulin resistance, and all of those things together create obesity. And it's not like, oh, just have self-control and stop eating. It's literally, it's the chicken or the egg. Does insulin resistance cause obesity, or does obesity cause insulin resistance? And science is kind of still out. The jury, believe it or not, is still out. We used to think that being obese caused diabetes and insulin resistance, but now research is showing that underweight or normal weight people can develop insulin resistance, and then eventually leads to obesity, right? So it really just depends on the person, their unique biological outline, their genetics, their conditioning. There's so many variables to consider. And that's just the insulin, glucose, blood sugar, emotion part. I mean, if you have, you know, a genetic disorder with your thyroid, which is your house of metabolism, if ghrelin and other satiety or signals and hormones that signal to the brain, hey, I'm full, I don't need any more food, if they're off for any reason because of stress or genetics, there are so many variables that have to do with obesity, diabetes, and insulin resistance, right? I mean, How many women here? I mean, I'm talking to 40 women, at least 3 to 5% of us are going to have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. What comes along with that? Insulin resistance. That is why we see central obesity or a large waist circumference and disorders like that. Cushing's disease, other thyroid, Hashimoto's, all of these things have to do with genetics, hormones, lifestyle, and conditioning. So I wish that there was like a single answer, because I think if there was, it wouldn't be such an epidemic, right? But because it's so multifaceted, it is not willpower. It is so much more than that. And I think seeing each individual person as the unique, constellation that they are is really going to imbibe us to be able to help them. And not until recently with semaglutide and other peptide hormones and things like that, there really wasn't a one size fits all. And so this is really giving us a lot of hope for the future to directly address this epidemic of obesity / insulin resistance diabetes. And again, two sides of the same coin here, right? So we're not really talking about one or the other. They really do 90% of the time come together.
Yeah, so we just announced our launch of Tirzepatide at the beginning of the month. So we're super excited. We launched semaglutide a few months ago, and we've had tons of success stories. Can you share a little about what semaglutide, these class of incretins in general, what do incretins do? Talk to us a little about that. And I want you to specifically highlight, because we launched Tirzepatide and a lot of people are here to learn more about Tirzepatide, what makes it unique? What's the difference? What's a GLP-1? What's a GIP? So maybe you could go into, talk to us on a broad level, and then, go down a little bit into the details and compare the two drug classes.
Absolutely. So semaglutide is just one incretin. So there are two in the body, GLP-1 and GIP. And they're fancy long words for things like, glucose, insulin, peptides, polypeptides. And at the end of the day, we don't need to know the verbiage. We just need to know what they do. So both are released in the intestines, in the large and small intestines. And semaglutide is just the GLP-1, where the new drug is both. So we're having both being activated in the body. So it's basically like more bang for your buck, because long-term cohort studies have shown that it has a greater weight loss for a longer extended period of time. And how does it work? Well, there are a lot of theories. One we know for sure is it works in the hypothalamus, signaling the gut basically says, hey, I have more than enough food, I'm full. So it signals to the brain satiety, bringing appetite down and making us not crave those foods as often, or when we do eat, eating a significantly smaller portion, right? So if we're eating less of those bad foods and our appetite is less, then logic says we're not going to spike our blood sugar as high, right? So that's really the goal of both of these. And not only that, but it binds to albumin, which means that it extends the half-life. So it's circulating in the body much longer than an injection that might have a bell curve of it takes a day or two, it peaks for a day or two, and then it comes down, right? So the bell curve is longer and it's lasting a longer period of time. So we're noticing more weight loss, up to 20% of body weight in some people. We're noticing lower satiety, less side effects. It's more financially, for a lot of people, it makes a lot more sense. And the studies, I mean, obviously we're still studying it because it was just approved within the last year. But the studies are very, very promising, because not only is it creating lots of long-term weight loss, but it's preventing type 2 diabetes. It's reversing type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. It's addressing insulin resistance. And not only people with diabetes, but if you don't have diabetes and you have hypertension, dyslipidemia, or high lipids, right? A lot of people have high cholesterol. It's helping with kidney issues, liver issues, fatty liver. It's helping stabilize blood sugar, like I mentioned, for people with things like PCOS and Cushing's disease. So it's basically just a much better, more effective, longer term and more affordable version of semaglutide. So, they both work for different reasons, but it's just a stronger, better, more effective drug in that that instance. Also, like I said, the side effects are a lot lower, like hypoglycemia is half as much compared to semaglutide. What was the other side effect? The nausea, which is a really big one I see in a lot of patients, is the nausea, upset stomach, diarrhea, constipation is a big one. So, as long as we're coaching them around adding fiber and protein and other things, it is just, there's really no huge downside that I'm noticing consistently. Now, obviously every drug has side effects. They all have contraindications or people that wouldn't qualify. But more than anything, this is the safest, most effective long-term weight loss and diabetes type 2 management drug available right now.
So interesting. As a naturopathic doctor and a nutritionist, what's your personal view on injections, prescription medication when it comes to weight loss? What is your personal take?
So I have kind of a specific window. And this is how I judge most things like vaccines, medications, any sort of injectable that's going to manipulate your biochemistry. Are the potential side effects of the drug better than the long-term comorbidities and damage of the disease? And when it comes to obesity and diabetes, you are looking at potential amputation, neuropathy, retinal degeneration, kidney disorder and disease. And when I look at all of those, which are significantly more severe, right? Risk of a heart attack, cardiovascular event, they're so much higher than the drug itself. And so to me, the cost benefit ratio makes sense. Now, I'm not going to lie, as a naturopath, we do try things for 6 to 12 months before, I'm testing their hormones, I'm testing their micronutrients, I'm putting them on a structure where we're not diet, right? The word diet, but changing the way that they relate to food, working on the mind body stress techniques, right? Helping them set themselves up for success by having berries and, nice cream, which is made of frozen bananas instead of dairy and high sugar things, but fruits. So we do try multiple things, and sometimes that works and we don't need to take the medication. But when BMI is above 30, and the adipose tissue is literally strangling the organs and preventing sufficient blood flow and oxygen and nutrient exchange, then to me, it's kind of a no-brainer to put them on the drug, let them see success, let them get that weight loss, their energy improves, they feel more confident in their own skin, then they're more willing to, open to, and have the energy to entertain, let's really work on your pantry and how you grocery shop, your relationship to stress and food, right? I kind of picture it like Indiana Jones when he did like the switch. It's like, you can't just rely on a drug, in my professional opinion, because that's not the root cause. The root cause oftentimes is your relationship to food, stress, and self-care. So we can utilize the drug for its benefits while we address the root cause. And then you have it's like a 2-for-1, 2 birds, 1 stone kind of thing. And that's my personal philosophy as a naturopath for things like weight loss drugs.
Yeah, earlier this morning when we were chatting, you were talking about what is the actual cost of you either pay for it now or you pay for it in the long run. And I think like you said, you have to weigh your options. Like, what are your options? What are you going to do today? And there's a lot of people, who are obese in their early 20s. Well, by 40, by 50, all this starts to catch up, right?
Yeah.
So,
it's really intense. This is actually the first generation that is speculated to live less or shorter lifespans than their parents due to obesity and early onset childhood diabetes. We're getting precocious puberty with girls getting their menses at 8 and 9 years old. And it's because estrogen lives in fat cells or adipocytes. And so when we're feeding these children just a lot of fast food, which I completely understand, lack of resources, right? Food deserts exist in major metropolitan areas where all they have is the dollar menu. And so, we're slowly but surely working on that and re-educating. But it really is an epidemic when children, young teens, and young adults are obese by the time they're 10 or 20 years old, right? Because that's setting their entire life up for potential comorbidities. And by the time they're 30, they're on multiple medications to manage their hypertension and high blood pressure, or a statin to manage their high lipids. And they're taking insulin, and they're having a heart attack by the time they're 40. Like, this is so preventable. It is absolutely preventable. And so I think it's worth a few $1,000s for a year or two, lose the weight, reverse the diabetes, really restructure the health picture so that we can add more years on to our life and not be on medications for 30 years and not have to go to the doctor 2 or 3 times a year and be managed with increased healthcare costs, and that's really what we were talking about, is the pay now or pay later. And if I can get it in check now and help 20, 30, 40-year-olds, or at any age really, reposition their relationship with food at the same time as giving them the results that they're looking for, then I feel like it's just a win-win all the way around. You're adding years to the lifespan and quality of life to those years, because who wants to live 10 years in a hospital bed or with a walker, right? And so it's extending life and quality of life, which I absolutely love and I'm a huge fan of.
Well, that's why we're starting the education early, and we're doing it now, right? So that it doesn't have to get to that point. So let me ask you, a lot of people are reporting, you talked about long-term benefits of these drugs. A lot of people are reporting these other benefits, like I don't crave alcohol anymore. I don't crave, so certain cravings, certain addictive, I actually saw a news article about it reduces the addiction to shopping. Who would have known? You're actually saving money in the long run. But why is that? What is happening? Why is it even prescribed for addictions? Can you talk to us a little about that?
Absolutely. So when we look at brain scans and EEGs of anybody who has a history of addiction, addictive disorder, what we notice is the dopamine part of the brain being lit up every time they have their drug of choice, whether that is shopping, alcohol, some sort of substance, food or sugar, right? Even sex and relationships, even likes on social media, video games, right? These all light up the dopamine centers of the brain, and we feel that reward system being, basically tagged every time. I mean, you open it up on your phone or your fridge, or it's constant. It's our body constantly looking for that. And so when we're on the drug, because it's lowering our appetite, what's happening is we're no longer feeding the dopamine response utilizing sugar. It also has a severe reaction with people who drink alcohol, can make you very nauseous, because as I'm sure a lot of you know, and if you don't know, alcohol essentially metabolically breaks down to sugar and spikes blood sugar just as much as like a donut or a piece of cake would. And so regardless of the substance spiking the blood sugar, alcohol and sugar, what we're noticing is the dopamine kind of addictive receptors. At first, there is some withdrawal, right? Because they're so used. Receptors are kind of like locks that need a key, and the key is the sugar, right? And so when they don't get their key, they're empty receptors, just kind of like, gimme, right? And after that initial few weeks or few months, depending on the person, those receptors get used to not being bound, essentially. And so some receptors will die off. Mm-hmm. And so now where we had hundreds of thousands of dopamine receptors, just gimme, now we have half as many receptors. So the cravings aren't there. So we're not as addictive, or the same stimulus isn't necessary. And so we realize, I don't need to mindlessly scroll for 3 hours a day and get my dopamine hit. I don't need to shop. I don't need to reach out to that person to get their attention or to pick a fight because I get some sort of satiety over like this frustration or stress of the relationship, right? I think a lot of people are really accustomed to that push and pull too. Wherever you're feeling that tug of war, that like, I want it, but I shouldn't want it. I'm bad, like that's all dopamine. And so those receptors, as they slowly die off, you just really don't crave the same stuff to the same extent, and like a little dab will do you, right? And so you can get by on a substantially less amount. You can have 2 or 3 sips of a drink or 1 or 2 bites of a donut and I'm good. I don't need to eat all 6 or have, the 6-pack. And so it's really retraining our biochemistry. And you know, because your background is biochem, so you absolutely know that it genuinely is changing our physiology. And in some cases, even anatomical structures, because those receptors aren't at the same population that they were prior to taking the drug.
Well, I mean, this sounds like a dream. Like if how long is it ideal for someone to be on this drug? Right. And then also maybe touch on long-term benefits that and the research that's coming out on the long-term benefits of cardiovascular health, et cetera, Alzheimer's disease. I mean, reducing inflammation, that's your background. So talk to us about the long-term benefits, and can we stay on a class like on a drug like this for long-term, for years, or even the rest of our life? What do you recommend? Talk to us a little about that.
So because the drugs are relatively new, 5 years or less, really are a lot of them in terms of FDA trials, we don't really have a lot of super long-term cohort studies. We don't know what happens after 10 or 20 or 30 years. So a lot of it is theoretical and speculation at this point. What I will say is the people that are on it for 2 to 3 years, they're managing just fine. A lot of things are improving. Their dose management, it kind of like, you know, you gear up a dose, you get to your weight loss, and then to manage, you're at a much lower dose. People who have come off of it, if they're not addressing the root cause of learning a new relationship to food, we do see rebound weight gain. It's not usually as much as like a phentermine or naproxone, which we see like 100% or 200% weight gain, rebound weight gain. So you do gain some of it back, but not all of it. So in terms of long-term, I think it could be a combination. At this point, it's too early to tell, but I think maybe a year on, and then it's like a skateboard. You kick, you push, and then you coast. And then, you know, we coast just on our own. And then maybe if a stressful event, hormones, menopause, a new disease state, something were to happen, then obviously getting back on it. And so it can ebb and flow. And so the studies just aren't there to know for sure if it's super long-term. But what I will say in terms of long-term benefits and management, I really want everyone here to walk away understanding how damaging high blood sugar is, right? So why exactly do we see all these organ systems having multiple failure or issues when blood sugar is high? Now, the reason is because just like when you put sugar in a pan and heat it over time, it caramelizes and gets sticky and tacky and kind of hard to scrub off. When your blood sugar is constantly high and not enough insulin is letting that sugar into the cells, right? It can actually caramelize. There's a medical process, but for all of us here to understand, it can caramelize the elasticity of your vessels, your arteries, your veins, everything. And blood is the highway, guys. That's how toxins leave. That's how nutrients get delivered. That's how oxygen gets delivered and carbon dioxide gets removed. It's our main source of life in a lot of ways, brain and cardiovascular system. Those are the two things our body works the hardest to keep alive. They're the first things and the most important things that our body needs. They also utilize the most blood sugar. So when blood sugar is high constantly, it caramelizes these elastic fibers and makes them stuck and hardened. And when they can't dilate and constrict, blood flow, nutrition can't get to the tissue to heal it, and toxins can't get away. So we get inflammatory disease. So think about where blood really does its most, right? So our eyes, our retina, that's why we get glaucoma when you age or have diabetes or blood issues and hypertension. Our kidneys, its number one job is to filter blood. It goes through our blood hundreds of liters all the time, every day, right? It's constantly filtering. So if the blood itself, or the highway which rides the blood, is literally caramelized, closed, or stuck, the kidneys will start to fail. Also, the liver, it's the biggest filter in the body. Everything goes through the liver: medication, stress hormones, sex hormones, things that are good, things that are bad, fat soluble, vitamins and minerals, and all those things have to go through the liver. It's a rich capillary bed of blood. So if we get fatty liver, we get liver disease, we get hypertension, right? Our heart has to work twice as hard to pump to get to those tiny capillaries of our fingertips and our toes. So what happens in diabetic neuropathy? you lose your fingers and toes. They start to go numb. You can't feel them. So if we can understand and educate our patients and our clients and people out there that the whole point of these drugs is to lower blood sugar, because blood sugar is a detriment to our vasculature, and wherever blood goes, a problem could arise, that then it makes sense why all of these other things are benefiting. We're seeing fatty liver disappear. We're seeing kidney issues disappear. We're seeing changes in eyesight improvement. We're seeing migraines, headaches, joint issues, neuropathy, that pins and needles feeling in your fingers and toes. Everything is improving long-term when on these types of drugs. So weight loss is great, right? You're going to look great in your dress or your pair of jeans, or you're going to feel great in pictures, and the ego is going to like it. But underneath the hood, you will literally function better mechanically, biochemically, physiologically. Your body's ability to utilize sugar and prevent that caramelization of the elastic fibers of your lumen is improved tremendously, right? So that's why we're noticing everything under the sun improving, which is pretty fantastic. I mean, one of the biggest is cardiovascular, because outside of obesity and diabetes, I'm sure we all know in America, heart attacks, pulmonary embolism, stroke in the brain, right? So blood flow to the brain is so important. The blood-brain barrier, it's how we think, it's how we get nutrition, it's preventing brain fog, headaches, all that stuff. So, at the end of the day, it kind of is a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about all the benefits. I mean, this sounds like a dream drug, right? But it does come with side effects. Every good thing that has the downside. So can you talk to us a little about the side effects and how individuals here, because a lot of people are already have tried this medication or considering it. So talk to us about side effects and how we can minimize or manage the side effects.
Absolutely. So when we think about the side effects, again, it's really, it kind of makes sense once we understand the biochemistry of it all. So if it's released in the intestines, right, these incretin hormones, then it kind of makes sense that intestinal distress is a side effect, because that's where it's being affected most. So we'll see diarrhea, we'll see constipation, because what it's doing, so we have this wave-like motion through our digestive tract, from our esophagus to our stomach to our intestines, all the way out. And it's called peristalsis. And it's kind of like when it works too quickly, we get diarrhea. When it works too slowly, we get constipation. And because the drugs work to slow gastric emptying and signal to the brain we're more full than we are, it makes sense that it's going to change the way our GI tract works, right? So the side effects are primarily in the GI tract, with nausea, upset stomach, indigestion, diarrhea, constipation. And one of the biggest ones that I tend to see is nutrient deficiency, because if you're eating less food, you're getting less protein. So hair loss, brittle nails, skin issues. You might be mineral or micronutrient deficient if you're not eating rich fruits and vegetables. Like at least half of your plate should be colors of the rainbow, and ideally fruits and vegetables, because that's really going to give you the fiber to regulate the peristalsis and make those bowel movements more normalized. And just making sure that we get enough actual nutrition when we're eating. Eating a calorie deficit or eating less will always create weight loss, which is great. But if we're robbing the body of essential nutrients like magnesium, which is needed to make neurotransmitters in the brain, right? Or to relax our muscles, or B vitamins for energy production, if we're not taking in nutrient-rich food and we're just eating one donut instead of 6, we're going to notice those side effects with the hair, the skin, the nails, GI, headaches, things like that. And so some people also report skin changes, looking older, more wrinkles, less elasticity in the skin. And so, we just want to make sure that we're addressing those beforehand by educating people, patients, and clients on it to make sure, okay, you're going to eat less. So we need to get bang for our buck. When you do eat, colorful, alive, fruits and vegetables, fiber, protein, at least 1 gram per ideal body weight. So if somebody's at 250 and they want to get down to 150, they need 150 grams of protein a day in order to prevent that hair loss, those brittle nails, because everything, nails, hair, skin, structures, protein is like the bricks of the body. It builds stuff for us, right? And so if we want to maintain the glow, the hair, the skin, the nails, the tissues, the organs, the joints, you know, all that stuff, you have to give your body the ingredients it needs to make all that stuff, which are amino acids, which come from protein.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting enough, I think I shared with you, I've lost 70 pounds twice in my life naturally on my own.
Round of applause.
Using the slow carb diet. And the slow carb diet is all about high fiber, low starch foods, avoid anything that's white, high protein. And for me, it's always been a protein game. If I received enough adequate, even if my calorie deficit, if I had calorie deficit, I wasn't eating as much. If I didn't get enough protein, I wouldn't lose the weight. My body would almost like hold on to the weight. So we talked about like the word diet. There's this, I cringe hearing that word.
Yes.
You're a nutritionist. So I want you to educate us on diet, nutrition. Should we avoid carbs altogether? Should we incorporate them? Which carbs do we incorporate? You know, talk to us now, put your nutritionist hat on and talk to us. What's an ideal diet, a day, a breakfast, lunch? Just give us a meal plan for a day that someone could follow. And then maybe like tell us, should we repeat the same meals? What can we do to supplement the weight loss? Or if we're not losing weight, we've capped out a little bit, you know, we need to spark it up again. Talk to us about that.
Great. I love that question. So I've done a ton of research on all diets. I've written multiple research articles on flexitarian, pescatarian, Mediterranean, vegan, plant-based, carnivore, keto, you name it, and I've looked at it. And they actually recently published what's called the planetary diet. And it's the diet that's ideal for our biochemistry and the most sustainable for the planet. And what that consists of is high fiber, high quality protein, and lots of colors of the rainbow. Because the more colors of the rainbow you eat, everyone, the higher the antioxidants and these things called phytochemicals. Phyto means plant. And so there's specific chemicals in plants that give them their robust colors, like chlorophyll in leafy greens. It's an antioxidant that can prevent tumor cells from developing, right? Even white in mushrooms and white asparagus, though that has a phytochemical color to it that helps the immune system produce different minerals and vitamins to give us our line of defense for basic cells in our immune system. Anthocyanins, which are like purples and blues and reds, and those are fantastic for things like heart health, brain health, joint health, right? So nature literally has all of the special magic ingredients we need to sustain. So this planetary diet, carbohydrates, like you said, there are three kinds. One is going to be a starch, a sugar, and then a fiber, or, you know, cellulose. So from there, the starch and the sugars spike the blood sugar, okay, which sometimes is good. If we haven't eaten all day and we can't focus and we're foggy, you know, a little bit of spiked blood sugar, having the fruit, having the juice, sometimes we need that, right? Because we're getting hypoglycemic. And so it's the thing that happens is too much of that thing. And so what we want to do is it not only peaks, but subsequently crashes when we eat starches, white bleached sugars, processed sugars. And it's that crash that is terrible for our blood sugar stabilization, our mood, our metabolism, weight. Again, insulin is, if it doesn't need to use it right away, it's going to store it for a rainy day. So if we're eating lots of sugar and getting that spike because, oh, it's 3 o'clock and we didn't eat lunch and I'm going to have a cup of coffee and a donut, right? We're spiking. The body's like, this isn't energy. This is false energy. We're just going to store it. And then we're like, but I only eat this many calories, but it's all sugar and carbohydrates. So what we need to do is, yes, build the blood sugar nice and stable, and then a slow and steady decline, right, of processing. And that's what fiber does. Fiber naturally slows the emptying of the GI tract. Fiber also binds to toxins, excess sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. We can get estrogen dominance. Do you get sore breasts, back pain, headaches, mood stuff, PMS, PMDD? You could have estrogen dominance, extra estrogen just circulating. So what binds to the toxins, the extra hormones and all the things and helps move it out? It's fiber. So fiber, you have soluble and insoluble. We all know insoluble when you eat corn. It goes in, it comes out the same way it went in. The body physically can't digest it. That's just meant to bulk the stool and give it a nice size, right? The soluble fiber mixes with water and it's more like the mop, and it's going to make the movements regular, nice size and shape. It's going to make them smooth. You're not going to get that gas, that bloating, that painful distension in the lower tummy we sometimes get when we don't have fiber. So carbohydrates aren't bad inherently. If keto works for you, that's fine. But what ends up happening over time, when your body runs on ketones too long term, then your body almost loses that muscle of utilizing insulin, glucagon, glycogen stores. And so you're kind of robbing your body of its natural ability to utilize carbohydrates. And at the end of the day, guys, your brain really does prefer glucose as its fuel of choice. And so, 100, 250 grams of carbs a day is great. Just make sure most of it comes from fiber containing complex carbs. Like instead of white bread, get Ezekiel sprouted bread, right? Instead of white pasta, try wheat pasta or brown rice instead of white rice. These things have that fiber component. So you're not, you don't have to live a strict Zen life of only eating salads, right? You can eat carbs, just make sure that they're giving your body the tools that it needs to function at its highest capacity. So focus on fiber, limit, starches and sugars when at all possible, or if you are going to eat them, minimally, and follow them up with a protein or a fat so you don't get such a crash, right? Because if you add, the donut with maybe a piece of cheese, or if you're non-dairy, some dairy-free yogurt, something that's going to have a fat or protein to it, again, that satiety and that slow utilization of the nutrition and slower gastric emptying is what you really want to stabilize blood sugar, mood, weight, all of those things. And like I said, with protein, so if you want me to walk you through a day, so I would have 30 to 40 grams of protein at every meal, 3 meals a day, and then maybe 10 or 15 at snacks.
So 30, 40 grams of protein, like how many eggs would that be? How many ounces of
Well,
chicken?
there's 7 to 8 grams in an egg. So to me, if you are dairy, you do eat dairy, let's say two eggs and some cheese, with a pre-sprouted grain bread. That would be great because, believe it or not, a lot of people don't know this, but grains have protein as well. So do vegetables. Like a cup of broccoli has 5 to 8 grams of protein, believe it or not. So that's, veggies, nuts and seeds. A bowl of lentil soup has 20 to 30 grams. 1 can of tuna has about 30 grams. 1 packet of salmon has about 30 grams. Normal 4 to 5 ounce fillet of fish. I'm pescatarian, so I'm talking a lot about seafood. But even 4 ounces of beef or chicken, right? Beef obviously is going to have higher fat and saturated fat. So we want to maybe 2-3 times a week, not a daily thing. But poultry, lower saturated fat is going to be great for the arteries and prevent the heart disease. So if we can shoot for a serving of protein is about the palm of your hand, or a stack of cards. Like if you look at playing cards, that's going to be about a serving, and that's anywhere from 20 to 30 grams of protein right in that single serving of red meat, poultry, seafood, or anything like that. Now, if you are plant-based, chickpeas, lentils, brown rice is huge. You can get protein pasta. I absolutely love the protein pasta. Beans and rice combined is what's called a complete protein. So if you have a cup of rice and a cup of beans, you're going to get about 20 to 25 grams of protein and every single amino acid that the body needs, not just a few here and there. And amino acids, everyone, again, are the building blocks. Amino acids like tyrosine make dopamine. So you don't need sugar if you're eating enough tyrosine. Amino acids like tryptophan from things like poultry make serotonin, which make your mood stable and you feel good, and melatonin, which helps induce sleep. So food really can be your medicine, everyone. Absolutely, it can be your medicine. So 30 to 40 grams of protein at each meal, handful of fruits and vegetables at each meal is going to be great. Nuts and seeds when you can, because they're really high in minerals and those micronutrients we talked about, magnesium, zinc, selenium, B vitamins, things like that. We really want to focus on. And last but not least, the colors of the rainbow, right? The antioxidants, the fiber, the nutrition, micronutrients, all those things are in fruits and vegetables. So that's how I would usually build meal plans for patients and how I eat myself. So, and hydrate. If you need to chug a bottle of water because you're so thirsty, guys, you're already dehydrated. The body can only absorb about 10 to 15 ounces every 15 minutes. So this is like a liter. So this should take an hour to drink. If I have like a quarter of it every 15 minutes, that's enough to really penetrate and hydrate my cells. If I drink it all at once, I'm going to be peeing clear, in 30 minutes. It's going to run right through you. And hydration is a really big thing for helping plump cells keep a youthful glow, helps detox the body as you're losing weight, because fat cells store a lot of toxins and sex hormones, like I said, the estrogen before. So if your body's utilizing your fat and you're losing it, you really want to increase that fiber and water content to make sure that everything's getting bound up safely and moved out of the back door, So yeah, those are my tips and tricks nutritionally.
I love it. So let me ask you, we're now approaching our 3-month assessments for some patient, and we're seeing drastic results. Like on one end of the spectrum, I'm losing weight, I feel great, it's perfect, it's hitting the spot. And then we have a small percentage of people that are like, I'm going up in my dose and I still don't feel that feeling of satiety and I'm still hungry. So one, talk to me about hunger. It's normal. I mean, we're supposed to feel hungry. So talk to us about normal hunger versus, okay, no, this drug's not working, I got to increase my dose. And then let's say we keep increasing our dose, but we're still not feeling it. What's going on here? Talk to us about that.
Yes, absolutely. So for the people who, it's a small percentage, but the people that these types of drugs aren't working for, at the root cause of it, it's probably not an insulin resistance issue, right? It doesn't really have to do with a misfiring of blood sugar, insulin, glucagon, and the things we talked about. That's honestly 80 to 90% of weight gain and obesity is related to that. For other people, it could be a genetic issue. It could be hypothyroid, so they want to get their thyroid checked. Could be autoimmune disease like a Hashimoto's, or another thing where your own immune system is attacking itself. It could be your ghrelin, which is like a hormone that sends feedback of satiety, hey, I'm full, and to stop. You could have issues in your brain that you need to, or in your other hormone production. So you want to get that checked out. It could be the mind-body stress piece, to where your body is so stressed out. You are in such an unhappy, overwhelmed, cortisol, adrenaline-induced lifestyle that your body is like, to survive, I absolutely have to eat regardless. So if people are like, it's not curbing my appetite, or I'm still eating the 6 donuts or the whole pizza to myself, then it's above and beyond something like an insulin resistance. And there are other things that could be at play. And we really need to look a little bit.
So, to talk about, so when do we know it's time to increase our dose, as opposed to, we have to, change our lifestyle or look under the hood, as you stated? When is it time to increase our dose? When is it time to look under the hood and look a little deeper?
For most people, I've seen some sort of weight loss or movement in the right direction pretty immediately. So if a few months have gone by and the needle hasn't changed, 4 to 6 weeks, we want to increase dose. And we want, incrementally, obviously, because the side effects of nausea and upset stomach can really hamper people's lifestyle. So we want to make sure it's not preventing them from going to work, picking up their kids, having their normal lifestyle. So it's an incremental increase every 4 to 6 weeks for most people. And if you're plateauing, like maybe you've seen some progress, but you've plateaued at that same high dose for months at a time, then chances are we need to really think about and consider other options. We need to get the thyroid checked. We need to make sure that what if it's diabetes type 1 that you might have, where the body, that you literally don't make insulin, right? And that's a whole nother thing. So the weight loss associated to things like insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, it's because the body can still make insulin to some degree. And so we can still work with what's there, but type 1 diabetics can't make it at all. So maybe you are misdiagnosed, or maybe we need further testing to see, right? So after 3 to 4 months, if you're not losing any weight, we want further testing, going back to the doctor, looking a little bit deeper under the hood, if you will, for other comorbidities that could be happening that you might not be aware of, right? So I think the diabetes type 1, making sure that there's not another hormonal issue going on, making sure it's not thyroid disease, or, sometimes it can even be like cancers, it can be Cushing's. If you're on prednisone, right, or steroid hormones for a long period of time, that messes with your cortisol, your stress hormone, your dopamine, so there are just so many things that it could be outside of that. But after the 3 to 4 month mark, I would consider other options.
I love that. And so if that is the case, what do you ask? What kind of a panel do you ask from your doctor? What do you say? What should you request? I go to my doctor. What do I say? I'm not losing weight. There's something wrong with me. What do you request from them at that point?
So it really depends on the patient, and it depends on other symptomology or signs that they might be having, right? So every person is going to be slightly different. For if they came into my office and somebody's like, I'm not losing weight, but my hair is falling out, that's hypothyroid. That's a sign of hypothyroid. And so they're still able to eat normal caloric intake, but for some reason hair is thinning, or if anything, they're plateaued or maybe even gaining a couple pounds, right? If somebody comes in and says, I'm not losing weight, and I'm feeling a little queasy, and they have a background of long-term steroid use or prednisone use, or they're starting to get the moon face of Cushing's disease, then I'm going to test for that. So, is it perimenopause where their hormones are drastically changing at the same time or concomitantly with taking the drug? And it could be a sex hormone issue. Then I'm going to look at estrogen, progesterone, DHEA sulfate, testosterone. So it really is dependent on the whole person and other signs and symptoms that they have. And I wish that there was like a single test or panel to request, but if you're going, I would highly recommend, if you're not liking the answers of your MD or DO, really searching for a functional medicine doctor or naturopath who's more, geared toward these specialty tests, and they kind of are looking through the weeds a little bit more, right? They're not going for the broad strokes or what happens to come through their office 9 times out of 10. You are the exception to the rule. So you need to go to a physician who is well-versed in addressing the exception to the rule.
I love that. So I know we're coming on time, actually we're there, but I want to ask one question that came in, and then some final thoughts and final words from you. Someone asked, after you've lost the 15-20% weight and then start slowing down in weight loss and you're at the highest dose, what do you do? So what's the transition period?
So at that point, everybody here should know that there is something biologically known as your set weight. And that is the weight in which your body functions the best at. And it might not match up with your ego. And I hate to break it to you. So if you've lost 20% of your body weight and you're sustaining at 150, 60, 70, and you feel good, you feel energized, other conditions have improved, your body, for your genetics, for your build, may need to function at that weight. And that is your ideal healthy weight, because being less, you might feel like you look better, but your body might actually be deficient in specific nutrients, body fat and muscle tone. You might start leaching minerals from your bones and get early onset osteoporosis. So you really have to recognize that there is an ideal set point for every body, right? If you're eating intuitively, you're moving your body regularly, you're hydrating, and you've lost all that excess fat, that could be your new set point. And at that point, you've titrated up to max dose. So you want to start maybe titrating down to what's known as a management dose, where you're able to manage on a lesser dose, get that appetite and that intuitive eating, that balance of your lifestyle. And some people might opt to, okay, I've reached my goal, I want to titrate all the way off and kind of see how I go. Now, once they start gaining that weight back, I think that that's a sign that maybe we didn't really learn as much about the foundations of food, or how to stress manage or deal with our cortisol. Maybe we're not exercising. So everybody's a little bit different when we look at their case. And I would need to consider a lot of other variables. But I think the titrating down to a maintenance dose and or trying to go off of it and see where your biology and your set point is naturally, those are both options at that point.
Oh, thank you so much. Wasn't she amazing? Like, thank you so
You
much
are amazing. Thank you.
and yeah, this was awesome. Super informative. I hope you guys took a lot away from this conversation. And Dr. Leone, I hope you'll join us again very soon. And
Love
thank
to.
you so much to all of you for joining us. I hope you had a lot of takeaways. Thank you again, everyone. Mwah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
And
you.
this concludes our educational week. Have a great night, everyone.